President Trump today saying we can soon expect a big announcement about the end of ISIS in Syria and Iraq.
The United States military, our coalition partners, and the Syrian Democratic Forces have liberated virtually all of the territory previously held by ISIS in Syria and Iraq. It should be formally announced sometime, probably next week, that we will have 100% of the caliphate.
Well, joining me now, national security expert Fred Fleitz, Asia expert Gordon Chang. Gentlemen, good to have you both here. Let's start with the announcement on ISIS. What do you think he is suggesting here, Fred?
Well, I think he's announcing a victory. President Trump took the shackles off of our military leaders and let them go after ISIS. We know that Barack Obama was extremely reluctant to engage ISIS. He had put restrictions on bombing, and the president is announcing a major foreign policy success.
Gordon?
Yeah, clearly that's what we're going to. And by the way, getting out of Syria and Afghanistan allows us to refocus our efforts on the one country that really does pose an existential threat to the United States. It's China. It's an existential threat against our economy, our society, our way of life. So we do need to refocus from the Middle East to East Asia.
And Fred, to Gordon's point, it's that critical, that relationship or that confrontation between the two of the three major powers on the globe. North Korea, though, because of its relationship to China, does that make the president's task in denuclearizing the peninsula all the more difficult, or is it helpful?
You know, there's an issue in negotiating both with North Korea and with China. There's a temptation just to make a deal, to say we've made a deal. And the U.S. has been fooled in negotiations with rogue states like this for years. I'm hoping we're going to see progress with North Korea. I understand the objective in the next negotiations will be to get concrete deliverables. And I hope Ambassador Bolton and Secretary Pompeo, they're very clear about that. We want real concessions, not something pretend, so we can say we got an agreement when we really don't.
Now, this president isn't about pretend. And the relationship is complex between the United States and China. But China is making it fairly clear, Gordon, again to your point, that they mean to dominate not just the region. They're not just to be a hegemonic power in their vision. They're to be dominating the geopolitical world.
Well, certainly we see it in Korea. You know, the Chinese have been openly violating sanctions. We have those ship-to-ship transfers on high seas, which the UN specifically has outlawed. Chinese ships are doing that. Chinese banks are laundering money.
And the UN came down on them like a ton of bricks, didn't they? They were outraged, and all sorts of nations lining up with the United States on that.
Right. And you had the UN panel of experts just 3 days ago talking about Chinese sanctions violations. You have Chinese banks laundering money. You have Beijing giving diplomatic support to Kim Jong-un. And, you know, Xi Jinping, the Chinese ruler, summoned Kim to Beijing last month, basically to sort of tell Kim, look, don't give in to the Americans.
And this is the president. Last night on the subject of China, and what he means to accomplish in that relationship, or if there is to be no relationship at all. Let's listen in.
We are now making it clear to China that after years of targeting our industries and stealing our intellectual property, the theft of American jobs and wealth has come to an end.
Fred, the president making that declaration crystal clear, yet the unregistered foreign agents of Wall Street, corporate America, the Chamber of Commerce, the Business Roundtable, the Koch brothers, fighting this president on his goals, his purposes, and the negotiations with the Chinese.
I agree with everything Gordon just said, I might add. I think there's an opportunity to negotiate a trade deal with the Chinese. We know their economy is hurting. We know their growth rate was down substantially in 2018 while our economy is moving. The Chinese say they want to talk about intellectual property theft. I frankly don't believe that yet, Lou. I think there's a possibility of negotiating a deal with China, but we're going to have to really keep the pressure up because they're going to try to throw us a bone and hope that they can outlast President Trump. These talks are going to be tough.
They're going to be tough. And the idea that we're negotiating with a country that's stealing as much as $600 billion in intellectual property and technology from us every year. Leave aside the $500 billion in deficits. I just have to say that we look extraordinarily weak, Gordon, when we're saying, you know, we're going to negotiate whether or not you can steal from us.
Yeah.
Why isn't that an act of war rather than a subject for a trade negotiation?
Yeah, I mean, you don't negotiate with criminals. You put penalties on them. President Trump did that with his Section 301 tariffs, which
Let's
are
be
remedies.
clear. If they were taking $600 billion from us that was not IP, that it wasn't simply technology, as if it's somehow an irrelevant asset, it's critical to the future. And that isn't cause for war.
Yeah.
I mean, how dare the Chinese even think about it? And how dare we put it forward as negotiation? It damn well better stop.
Yeah, well, you have criminality here. It's out-and-out criminality, what the Chinese have been doing. And with the cyber thefts, they are going after our IP. And if you aren't able to commercialize your innovation, you don't have an economy of the future. That's what the Chinese are specifically targeting, Lou. They're targeting the American economy. This is an existential threat.
You agree, Fred?
Yeah, I agree. But look, China's doing this because it's gotten away with it so long under repeated
No, I
Republican
understand that.
Democratic
But you know,
administrations.
just because their tanks roll across Alaska before we could react doesn't mean that we would like to have their tanks rolling across Alaska, does it?
No. You know,
I mean, the fact that they've gotten away with it is now irrelevant. It is time to draw a line.
You're right. You know, we've tolerated this for too long, thinking that when China's economy develops, eventually we'll get after them. You know, we're our own worst enemy here. And it is President Trump's responsibility to fix the mess he was left by numerous administrations, Republican and Democratic.